Brainwashed, Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority by Tom Burrell. Chapter 4, Uglified. Why are black and beautiful still contradictions? Why are black and beautiful still contradictions? It is no secret to many of us that we have internalized racist, sexist notions of beauty that led many of us to think that we're ugly. And the media have bombarded us with stories that white children are cleaner and nicer. The white dominated media presents this knowledge to us as if it's some defect of black life that creates such apparent and self negating behavior, not white supremacy. Bell Hooks, Sister of the Yam. In 2006, many of us watched HBO mouths agape in pain and astonishment as 17-year-old film student Kiri Davis presented her documentary Girls Like Me, a recreation of a famous experiment by Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark that was instrumental in historic 1954 Brown versus Board of Education victory. 15 of the 21 children Davis filmed at the Harlem Daycare Center preferred white dolls over black dolls. Davis' 2005 results were shockingly similar to those of Clark's, who during the 1940s used black and white dolls to study to demonstrate children internalized with racism. The following description of one of the exercises in 2005 study was described by the NNPA news service and published in the Final Cause newspaper. The reassuring female voice asks the child a question. Can you show me the doll that looks bad? The child, a preschool-aged black girl, quickly picks up and shows the black doll over the white one that is identical in every aspect except complexion. And why does that look bad? Because she's black, the little girl answers emphatically. And why is this nice doll? And why is this the nice doll? The voice continues. Because she's white. And you can give me the doll that looks like you. The little girl hesitates for a split second before handing over the black doll that she has just designated as the uglier one. The doll in both Clark's and Davis' studies were identical in every way, except for color. I can't help but wonder if all the kids would have chosen white dolls if they were more African looking, wide noses, broad lips, with the natural hairstyles. More than 60 years after the Clark study, 40 years after The Black is Beautiful, rang out across the nation, and more than 40 years after Naomi Sims, the first African-American supermodel to grace the covers of Ladies' Home Journal in 1968 and Life magazine's 1969. Black girls still prefer white dolls over and reject black ones. The one time we see a doll chosen in the 2005 documentary and chosen with painful hesitation is not when a young black girl is asked which doll is smarter, which doll is prettier. No, it was when she's asked, which doll looks like you? Slowly with embarrassment, or maybe it was hurt that twisted her expression, the child selects the black doll. How is this possible? How could our children still be editing black out as it relates to beauty and brilliance? Why do black adults far too often do likewise? Uglified dynamics. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that whites are the prettier people, that their traits and physical attributes are more suitable than our own ugly features. The modern day dynamics of this negative propaganda are manifested in these ways. 1. White is right. Black beauty as the antithesis of white norms. The further we are from the European standard, the lower we find ourselves on the beauty scale. We judge beauty by our most significant features, our noses and lips. If our nose is too wide or too flat, it's the direct opposite of the white standard, narrow and predominantly bridged. The bigger the lips, the more our appearance become an antithesis of the accepted thinner European mouth. 2. Get back, black. We are better if we are lighter. We want our children to be pretty because we know beauty will grant them an easier life in a color-coded society. Most of us don't want to be reminded of our past, our ancestors, and where we come from. Many of us boast of having a little Indian, Irish, Italian, any additional blood in our lineage boosts our value. We find ourselves using a sliding racial scale somewhere between black and white, with lighter or whiter always defined as better. Number 3, nappy not happy. There is no aspect of black physical appearance that has more psychodynamic value than our hair. Black hair carries an extraordinary advertising weight and is among the leading topics which used for editorial content for black news, articles, books, and magazines. The amount of time and money spent in beauty salons speak to our obsession with black physicality and beauty standards. Hair repair is the easiest of the inferiority dynamic to transform. A box of relaxer costs under $15, whereas plastic surgery can be prohibitively expensive. Fixing that nappy hair is to cover up or cure the scourge of blackness. Our impossible obsession to meet white beauty standards is needed in our trek from servitude to freedom. Emancipation unlocked physical shackles, but mental bondage forged through centuries of indoctrination keeps blacks strapped to the notion that our looks are somehow connected to the inhumane treatment we endured. I grew up thinking I was ugly, and my mother reinforced that. She said things like, "Stop poking out those lips. They are already too big. They look like two sausages." My mother never told me I was a beautiful woman. A quote by Tanya, age 52. So what do you expect? Told of Kerry Davis' findings, Julia Hare, a San Francisco psychologist, said, "Our children are bombarded with images every day that they see on television screens and on coffee tables, either the light-skinned female that everybody is pushing, or they give preference to the closest to white images. Give the centuries of brainwashing that equated black with uglier, inferior, and undesirable. It really isn't surprising that many black children, like their parents and generations of blacks before them, reject their own image. Our analysis should start with these questions. How do we see ourselves? Why do we see ourselves as physical inferior? When the colonies became America, the primary campaign to ugly African slaves become more intense, pervasive, and codified. The message was reinforced in a myriad of ways, including Thomas Jefferson notes on the state of Virginia, when he demeaned blacks while defending the standards of superiority white beauty. The first difference which strikes us is that of color is it is not the foundation of a greater or a less share of beauty in the two races, are not the fine mixtures of red and white, the expressions of every passion by greater or less sufficiency of coloring than one, preferably that the internal monotony which reigns in the countenance, the immovable veil of black which covers all the emotions of the other race. Add to these flowing hair, a more elegant symmetry of form, their own judgments in favor of the whites, declared by the preference of them. The circumstances of superiority, of thought worthy of attention in the propaganda of our horses, dogs, and other domestic animals, why not in that of a man? Jefferson's message served as a part of the Great American Brainwash campaign. It was coupled with other propaganda emphasizing that black was the standard color of evil, a blight from God and the mark of Ham, Noah, cursed son. African Americans, as the secondary audience of this campaign, were bombarded with images and words that stigmatized our appearance as a byproduct of the virulent disease. At the same time, an aesthetic superiority, white beauty, alabaster skin, sleek noses, silver thin lips, and straight, lustrous hair was widely promoted as the absolute standard of beauty. In the 6 decades since the Clark experiment, we have more images of African Americans than ever on television, in blockbuster films, and on the covers of popular magazines. Yet, even with the growth of these diverse media images, one constant remains: black beauty is still considered inferior to the established standard of beauty. The idea that cultural norms defined during slavery still looms large in contemporary American society seems prosperous. That was 150 years ago. What does it have to do with what's happening now? Some might say. I will argue almost everything. Those pretty, high yellow girls. Being mixed, I knew that I was a black, but I don't necessarily look it. Men who only date white women see me as a prize. Women who hate their brown skin want daughters that look like me. White men see me like an exotic car or something. A quote by Lisa, age 36. Toni Morrison's 1970 novel The Bluest Eye tells the story of a black girl who desperately yearns for blonde hair and blue eyes. It speaks to a light skinned, dark skinned racism within the African American community and paints portraits of those whose personal value lessness has been dictated to them from without. For most of our history in the New World, we openly coveted light skin and straight hair. Today, the pinnacles of black female beauty remains almost white looking. It is disturbingly tells that they long weave seems to be a prerequisite for black singers, actors, and models. Hip hop videos featuring light skinned black, Latino, or Asian women to the exclusion of darker skinned black dancers. In these befuddled musical sketches of black life, blinged out heroes surround themselves with the lighter skinned trophies. The darker women in such videos are rarely positioned as the pedestal prize. That place is usually reserved for the surrogate white girl. Color struck class wars. The color grading and class stratification structure intensified under the plantation system. Division among slaves was aggregated by the privileged sum slave masters awarded to their light-skinned offspring. Even if the slaver didn't acknowledge his children, the known fact that they were spawns of the perceived superior race solidified, in some instances, skin color as an indicator of status on the plantation. African Americans throughout the generations sought ways to lessen the stigma of inferiority. Mothers wistfully pinched the wide, broad nose of their children in a vain attempt to Europeanize them. The attempt to cover up our blackness started with bleaching creams heavily advertised in the black press. Other blacks tell stories about the parents who rub their face with grapefruit or add a bit of Clorox to their bath in crude attempts to lighten the skin color. Many a black child was warned not to drink coffee or told to get out of the sun cause it will make you black. Many of these children grew up and repeated their parents' practices with their own children, albeit in perhaps less abrasive forms. Author and journalist Asha Bandel, who lives in a largely black Caribbean neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, recalled how her light-skinned, long-haired daughter was often the recipient of an unbuying and unwanted gifts from strangers when she took the child shopping at the local knick-knack store. People would just buy something for my baby and hand it to me, saying, "She's just so beautiful. Look at her hair." Sometimes the person's own child would be standing there giftless and brown. The color-struck class war play out in black families, neighborhoods, social clubs, churches, colleges, fraternal organizations, and nearly every conceivable part of our culture. As the stigma progressed, class stratifications within the black community became based to a large degree on the presence or absence of black features. It is profound irony that the attractiveness rating was enhanced by the whiteness of hair, skin color, and facial features. Sadly, that rating system continues today. Pink and Pretty. When the Clarks conducted the original doll experiments, black women on the silver screen were struck between the two narrow standards of beauty. The servile, dark, kinky hair prototype portrayed by actresses such as Hattie McDaniel, or a long hair butterscotch beauty like Dorothy Dandridge or Lena Horne. In a society designed by white male dictates, women in general who have long abided hypocritical standards of beauty. Black women, however, had the double burden of adhering to images of loveliness that portrayed their natural features. Madam C.J. Walker's hot comb, introduced and popularized in the early 1900s to straighten black women's hair, helped after a prime physical symbol of shame. Walker was a brilliant maker, but, according to the biographer and kin, Alelia Bundles, she too wrestled with the notion that she encouraged black women to ameliorate the standards of white beauty. Right here, let me correct the erroneous expression held by some that I claim to straighten hair. Walker told a reporter in 1918, after she had been called the Dekink Queen by a white newspaper, "I deplore such an impression because I have always held myself out as a hair culturist. I grow hair." Walker's intention may have been misunderstood, but her products helped black women influenced by society's orders to straighten out their natural beauty. In my neighborhood, little black girls attach long ribbons to their kinky braids and toss their heads about, with the ribbons flowing down their backs, whisking across their faces, wildly imaging that they were two long, silky, straight tresses. Whoopi Goldberg memorably dramatized our hair hang up when she created the character of a young black girl wearing the shirt on her head, pretending that it was to be her hair was beautiful hair cascading down her back and around her shoulders. All this acting out was the result of all encompassing images of white beauty forced on the psyche of African Americans. Black men may not be obsessed over beauty standards as black women, but we too have been psychologically influenced by a system that has deemed our natural looks as something repulsive. Black men may not be obsessed over beauty standards as black women, but we too have been psychologically influenced by a system that has deemed our natural look as something repulsive. God don't like ugly. Heartthrob never, black and ugly as ever, however, I stay Gucci down to the socks. A quote by Notorious B.I.G. One more chance. As his lyrics seem to indicate, Biggie Smalls, aka Notorious B.I.G., was probably influenced by folks who looked like us. Like so many others, he probably heard blacks can call one another ugly, especially because they were so black. After all, young dark-skinned boys, like Biggie had noticed to older blacks fawning over light-skinned kids they considered pretty. These kids watched their own people compliment the fair-skinned kids' nice complexion, read light skin, or enviously stroke their good grade of hair, read naturally straight. Positive white and negative black imagery affected all our young lives. As a child, I remember coming home after watching movies featuring stars like Cary Grant, Clark Gable, Roy Rogers, Johnny Tarzan Weissmuller. I'd get in front of the mirror and attempt various forms of tucking in my lips, hoping to simulate the look of my heroes. While women were using Madam Walker's project, black men suffered through caustic, owl-based conks popularized by athletes and entertainers like Sugar Ray Robinson, Nat King Cole, and numerous other black role models. Our hair had been fried into flat and lifeless forms of its true form to be acceptable even to ourselves. In this autobiography, slain activist Malcolm X spoke to his once brainwashed condition that motivated his desire to conk his naturally red hair. How ridiculous I was, stupid enough to stand there simply lost in admiration of my hair now looking white reflected in the mirror. I vowed that I'd never again be without a conk, and I never was for many years. The uglified manifestation in men and boys are now nowhere near as glamorous as the women. Yet, there are indicators that black men still struggle with their share of absorbed misconceptions about their appearance. According to Extreme Makeovers, Dr. Anthony Griffin, a Beverly Hills plastic surgeon, the fastest growing increase in plastic surgery is among the black men concerned about their image. While we no longer have the spade and conks, we do not still have the desire to tame our natural hairstyles. This is why the stores still carry S curls and other perm products that help men loosen their curls. Why else do school-aged boys obsessively brush their shortcuts in an attempt to train their hair into ocean waves? The remnant of brainwashing linger, and one of the strongest signs of persistence in the black males who prefer women who look nothing like them. The message in the medium. In early American literature, posters, and later films, black males were caricatured as slow, slope-shouldered, slouchy, and sleepy. It's interesting to note that these images reveal an emphasis on looseness, loose head hanging from a horizontal neck, loose lips hanging from a downcast face, loose empty hands hanging from a long, limp simulant-like arms, loose tattered clothing, and loose shoes, if any, and loose, lazy, slurry speech. White male figures, on the other hand, were generally projected as tight, majestically erect, stoic, intelligently involved, and totally in control of their world. In short order, both whites and blacks exposed to the same negative images in books, plays, posters, postcards, salts, and pepper shakers. Jolly Nigger, Banks, and other media products totally embraced the mass marketing standards of beauty. blacks, convinced that they were indeed Krotskit, soon took over our own denigration. Whenever we fought or argued, which was often, our arsenio included creatively invective put-downs which became known as playing the dozens, and the most egregious slurs we could possibly hurl related to black physicality. Yo mama so black she's, yo mama so fat she's, yo mama so ugly she's. There is no stronger social force, no greater mindsetter, no more effective influencer than conventional media. Films, like all other forms of pop culture, reflect how the artist sees the world, which images are known in their work, however, demonstrates how artists see themselves. When we examine music videos produced by blacks that cast us either pimps or whores, but hardly ever as a fully human, or movies that portray black men, black women as fat, loud vulgarities, we recognize that we're still trapped in a perfect storm of self-hate. For centuries, the stigma associated with skin too dark, noses too broad, and hair too nappy hampered black self-esteem and the ability to raise black children who did not consider themselves black and ugly. Black proud, say it loud. There was a brief moment of hope and collective transformation in the late 1960s when the younger, less tolerant progeny of the civil rights era birthed the Black Power movement. To be called black was no longer an insult. It was liberating. Suddenly, many of us supported ashikis, raised clenched fists, shouted black power and black is beautiful, and sang James Brown, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. The movement influenced every area of culture and gave rise to the black arts movement. It wasn't just mainstream politics that changed, but education, music, fashion, and language shifted to reflect the demands of those who refused to go unheard. We seemed to believe, at least for the moment, that black was the new beautiful. Afros emerged like the black crowns, worn as a sign of liberation from shame and self-doubt. It was a demonstration of self-determination and self-love. It was a sign of hope and renewal of spirit. Brown and ebony-skinned sisters were elevated to gorgeous sex symbols, vision of loveliness and grace. Black women, who had accepted the myth of inferiority, had all but given up on themselves, suddenly had role models like Pam Grier on every screen kicking behind and taking names. They could look at bad sisters like Kathleen Cleaver and Angela Davis and see themselves as not only beautiful but smart, strong, and politically conscious. Black women could see their whole selves reflected in the New Essence magazine, founded by a longtime publisher of CEO Ed Lewis with 4 partners in 1968. Steeped in the symbolism of African artifacts, handshakes, slogans, songs, and self-admonitory poetry, and the take no prisoner stands of black activism, we tried desperately to shake off centuries of negative indoctrination. In short, we began slowly to love the whole of our black selves. It is within this engaging environment that my firm, Burrell Communication Group, flourished, a time when our 2 largest clients, McDonald's and Coca-Cola, eagerly agreed with our strategy to inject more natural-looking black people in our ads. Actually, I traveled a path blazed by another black advertising pioneer, Vince Cullors. In 1956, he founded Vince Cullors Advertising Incorporation, the first black-owned advertisement agency in the nation that expertly targeted the black consumer market. When Johnson Products hired him to advertise his black hair care products, Afro Sheen Colors, meet the change with the proud tagline, Watu Wazuri, Swahili for black people. In that era of a newfound pride, my firm had to challenge some of our clients and retrain employees who came to us from other agencies that were still clinging in entrenched standards of beauty. Fortunately, once provided with convincing information, most eagerly came on board and benefited from this new liberated consumer base. It was indeed an electric time of unlimited possibility and an insane time to own and operate an advertising agency specializing in the black consumer market. The empire strikes back. Unfortunately, the new movement lasted for less than a decade. Old folks, for the most part, never brought into it. When others referred to themselves as black or Afro-American, many elders insisted on keeping the colored or Negro brand. Spouting defensive retorts that reflected the depth of the black inferiority complex conditioning. I ain't black, and I ain't never been to Africa. By the late 1970s, many young people who were eagerly enthusiastic of black is beautiful concept gave into the pervasive social pressuring of fitting in with the mainstream. It was time, especially for college students who've been in the forefront of the movement, to get jobs in government and in the nation's school systems or in corporate America. Time to integrate and assimilate, fulfilling the dreams of the generations past. The 60s and the 70s war on poverty got trumped by the 80s war on crime. Various of social forces prevailed, led by popular culture and the media. As more formal and legal barriers to race fell, God-given hairstyles were deemed not professional enough. Anything remotely approaching natural froze, cornrows, braids, dreadlocks that offended or scared the heck out of white people in the workplace became taboo. Black women picking up on cues from their men as well as to attain good jobs reverted to appearing less black, most by undergoing the process of Caucasization of the hair. While still burdensome, it was much more doable than in the days of Madam C.J. Walker's press and curl. Meanwhile, the hair care industry relentlessly marketed new products giving black men and women the soggy jerry curl look, followed by the 90s waterfall of weaves, extension, and wigs of endless straight hair variety for women. As a responsive of the age of increasing American conservatism, a black college administration dictated that no students in the business school would be allowed to wear African braids lest they disrupt the image of the proper business person. By 2007, a slideshow presented by an unidentified Glamour magazine editor caused an uproar on the internet. The presentation, Do's and Don'ts of Corporate Fashion, shown at a prestigious law firm, basically forbade just about any natural black hairstyle in a corporate environment. American Lawyer magazine described parts of the slideshow presentation. First slide up, an American African woman sporting an afro. A real no-no, announced the Glamour editor to the 40 or so lawyers in the room. As for dreadlocks, how truly dreadful. The style maven said it was shocking that some people still think it's appropriate to wear those hairstyles at the office. No offense, she sniffed, but those political hairstyles really have to go. According to blackvoices.com, the magazine quickly disavowed the editor's comments, saying that she in no way spoke for the publication. Whether she spoke for the magazine or not, the editor's comments were accurate. Tragically, imitating whiteness has once again become the new black look. Back with where we started. Today, the hum of black is beautiful is something we occasionally utter and rarely believe. The signals, the culture cues, the media images, the charismatic public personalities all come together with singular, consistent, resounding counter theme. Black is not beautiful. The hair and flair of lighter-skinned actresses and models in films and magazine covers reinforce the notion that dark and lovely is fine in the hair coloring products, but indeed out of fashion in real life. The preponderance of the images and messages send clear signals to blacks, especially black children, that we are not pretty enough, not good enough. Consider the slogan "Perfection Made Easy." That soft scene Curson uses to promote its dark and lovely kids' beautiful beginning hair care system. What messages are black children receiving when using these products to relax their hair? Most likely they learn that black features don't fit the definition of perfection. What's disturbing is that the lessons don't always come from outsiders. What's disturbing is that the lessons don't always come from outsiders. Consider the daughters of comedian Chris Rock. While promoting his 2009 film Good Hair about a $9 billion black hair care industry, Rock told interviews that he was inspired to make the film by his two daughters, who didn't think they have good hair. Rock's wife, Malik Compton Rock, added more detail to the story during April 11, 2008, MSNBC Conversation About Race panel discussion. According to the Compton Rocks, The couple's 3-year-old daughter, Zahara, came home from school depressed because her hair was not long as one of her non-black friends. Compton Rock told the MSNBC audience that she comforted Zahara by telling the child that she loves her hair fluffiness and puffiness and that it did not distract from her unique beauty. I wasn't the only one who caught the contradictions in Compton's Rock heartfelt consolation. Thankfully, Kay Danielle Edwards, a Nashville-based writer, addressed my concerns in Mama's Where's Your Hair Natural? Her blackcommunicator.com observations. Here was Compton Rock bemoaning her daughter's ambivalence about her own hair, seemingly befuddled and blaming society and the media when she herself was donning at least 18 inches of silky straight weave. In late September 2009, Oprah Winfrey interviewed a black mother whose 3-year-old daughter, like the Rothschild, also come home from school upset because her hair was not pretty and wouldn't go down. With her husband and daughter by her side, the mother Vanessa described how she addressed her daughter's concern. She didn't just tell the child that her hair was perfectly acceptable, she showed her. Vanessa showed her own locks, and she had been chemically relaxed since herself was a child. I wanted her to be a role model for our daughter, to show her that straight is just one of the options we have as African American women. Now I'm wearing a teeny weeny afro and looking forward to growing out and seeing what it teaches me about myself. Again, I think Edwards, the Nashville writer, summed up the situation better than I could when she stressed how daughters in their formative years copy and mimic everything their mothers do. If we as black women go around looking like male-believed pretend white women, playing a bad form of dress-up so common that we no longer see it for what is it? Well, guess what? Our daughters will want to, too. To deny that looking a certain way is not a huge factor in this society is to deny reality. To deny that looking a certain way is not a huge factor in this society is to deny reality. The BL reprogramming process begins when we question why one's image is consistently chosen over another. Why one image is always counted in while the other dark and natural image is often counted out. We discover answers when we compare the uglified dynamics to the ugly lessons learned from slavery and race-based oppression. Uglified connecting the dots. Contemporary side, manifestation side, and the historical root side. On the contemporary side, white is right. Black is beautiful. The antithesis of the white standards. The further we are from the European standard, the lower we find ourselves on the beauty scale. Historical root side. Our historical idiocy is proof that our inferiority lay in our non-European characteristics, color, hair, and facial features. Contemporary side. Get back, black. Using a color-coded society, many of us boast of an additional blood, Indian, Irish, Italian, that boosts our value. On a sliding racial social scale, lighter or whiter is defined as better. Historical root side. During and after slavery, blacks understood that mixed racial heritage conferred greater status and produced preferential treatment and labeled them more attractive. Hollywood and media affirmed the stigma. Consensus that being of mixed race was more desirable than being purebred black prevailed. Contemporary. Nappy? Not nappy. The obsession to alter black physicality and beauty standards is extraordinary. Our hair carries extraordinary psychodynamic ramifications advertising weight. Blacks spend millions on hair care products to cover up or cure the scourge of blackness. The historical root side of that. The coarse texture of our hair was used to prove our inferiority from the beginning. Conditions to equate white hair as the epitome of good hair. We have strived to achieve it decades after decade. The conditioning was so successful that it was outlast efforts to reclaim our own ethnic identities and standards of beauty. At what cost? Along with intensive hair care strategies, cosmetic surgeries, interventions designed to diminish the Africanized broad nose and other cultural inconveniences have become widely available. Though not as prevalent as hair procedures, it is increasingly an option for those who can afford it. Cosmetic surgery, with nearly $1 billion annually expenditure by African American men, women, and even some children, plays a large part in eliminating telltale signs of blackness. We are bombarded with images of black women flingering, flipping, flicking copious mounds of weave, extension, wigs, falls, and relaxed hair. Dancers on music videos have fine cocainized features into hair to spare. Advertisements for everything from cosmetics to automobiles ensure that today we are still fed ample, steady dyes of white beauty standards via light-skinned black African Americans. Even among publications that regularly feature black celebrities, rarely will you find characteristically African features. We can go along to get along with the dominant society dictates, or we can just start analytically process by weighing the costs and benefits of our thoughts and actions. Short-term benefits. Number one, acceptance. Why risk isolation or losing employment or promotion just to buck societal norms? It's easier to accept what's deemed normal and not make a fuss about our looks or our hair. If a nose job, weave, or a perm would make me more attractive, so be it. Number two, relieving the pain. My child does not need to feel like an oddity. If their friends aren't wearing afros or hair puffs, why should I force it on my child? Sends an unnecessary image of rebellion and black identity to the whites. Number three, don't want any trouble. Big afros, cornrows, braids threaten white people. They immediately perceive these hairstyles as radical and me as rebellious. White people make and enforce the rules. Neither my child nor I need to be harassed, held back, or ostracized because of our own hairstyles. The long-term cost. Number one, acceptance. Accepting the status quo definition of societal norms serves to sanction the condition of white superiority. As an evolving society that is becoming more and more global, it is incumbent on us to challenge what has been labeled normal by a narrow minority. 2. Relieving the pain. Discouraging your children's natural look simply because it defies popular imagery actually makes them an oddity. Future leaders need to feel proud of their unnatural look as much be discouraged from following the dictate of media messaging. Celebrating our unique look is not rebellious. Any effort to punish children comfortable in their natural look should be challenged aggressively. Number 3, don't want any trouble. Altering our looks or hairstyles because whites feel threatened validates racist perceptions. Whites must learn that blacks with afros, cornrows, and braids can be just as professional, courteous, and creative as those with short and straightened hair. Yes, whites have more power than blacks to make and enforce rules. However, some rules, especially those influenced by a false sense of superiority, are made to be challenged and broken. Centuries of propaganda created the perceptual aesthetic deficit. We will need powerful weapons to disenslave and reprogram how we see ourselves. To wage a winnable war, both internally and externally, we will need the proper ammunition. Uglified, the positive propaganda cues. Look past the lie. We have to overcome the barrage of propaganda that tells us that European standards of beauty are the only valid ones. Black beauty is all good. There is more than one way to be beautifully black. We come in all colors of the rainbow, in all shapes and sizes. Embrace who you are. It's yours to define what it means to be fine. Whether you perceived as beautiful or not depend largely on how you see yourself. If you feel beautiful, you will act beautiful, and you will be perceived as such. Black beauty comes naturally. Let yourself be. Don't allow the propaganda to convince that you need to be altered to be beautiful. Black beauty, no alterations needed. No alterations necessary. Black is beautiful. Really? The silver streak at the tip of her afro speaks of her maturity. She has dark skin and proud African features. She is beautiful. The photo accompanying the expressive bio of Xerox Corporation's chief executive officer, Ursula Burns, exudes her outward and inner splendor. Women who look like Burns, who defy the popular westernized definition of beauty, should be celebrated not as an exception but as part of a diversified standard of African American beauty. The so-called beauty norms must be altered and expanded to include women who are proud of their natural looks, like Burns. For our own and our children's sake, we must stop sending subliminal messages that our hair needs something extra to be okay or that our looks aren't acceptable as is. The magic of the moment. On November 4th, 2008, a brown-skinned miracle President-elect Barack Obama, accompanied by his beautiful chocolate-colored Southside Chicago wife and their lovely young daughters, strolled onto the Grant Park stage amid massive applause and thunderous chants of "Yes, we can." Although it would never be announced officially, the Obama family and the White House has already launched the biggest anti-BL campaign in the history of our nation. Obama may be a mixed heritage, but he looks like any other brother. How refreshing to see a black man with a natural swagger defy negative stereotypes while professionally serving as the country's head of state. How uplifting to also see a brilliant, strong-willed, dark-skinned First Lady served with grandeur without a molecule of the stereotypical Shirley Sapphire, acquiescent, and Janema-like baggage. And perhaps the greatest achievement is that Michelle Obama has never made the slightest attempt to be whiter than other First Ladies. In The Power of the Fro, long-term Washington, D.C. hairstyle expert and journalism major Laquita Thomas Banks wrote about the re-emergence of the afro and other natural hairstyles among today's young black models, singers, and entertainers such as Angie Stone, Jill Scott, Tamika Frazier, Marsha Hunt, Wakima Hollis, Erykah Badu, and others. Those comics gave a nod to historical figures Angela Davis, Cecilia Tyson, Pam Grier, and other women who classify the afro as a symbol of black beauty, feminism, liberation, and cultural revolution that would be looked upon as such for years to come. Those of us who know that long hair or light skin are not requisites to beauty must correct the record, beginning with our children whose images of manhood and womanhood by our own hands narrow, self-hating, warped versions of the truth. The children is relevant today, and our resolve must be firm. We must refuse the consumer of black films and the street lit to popularize negative black caricatures in ways worse than those of racially conditioned white filmmakers, cartoonists, and authors. If we have the courage to look at our own words and adopt new ways of speaking, we begin to stand as bullocks against manipulated ignorance. If we never again say things like he's so black in a way that makes black sound like a curse, a hated thing, we start reclaiming our minds and the minds of our children. Terms like ugly and black bitch are tentacles that strangle valuable bonds and connections. Adopting a new lexicon and supplemental terms such as beautiful, beloved, brother, and sister not only builds positive consciousness, it may reduce the reflective needs for negative racial epithets in times of anger and frustration. Surveying how we see ourselves, talk about ourselves, and project ourselves, and then making meticulous, concerted efforts to redefine beauty by our own standards, begin the ultimate journey in discovering our true, proud, resilient, beautiful, and natural selves. Most important, perhaps, is the need to de-emphasize the reliance on appearance and as the primary means of valuing people. Fortunately, the anti-brainwash campaign offers mechanisms create to help reprogram and empower blacks to reclaim their images and develop new, genuine standards of beauty.